There is actually a hailstorm going on as I am beginning to film this, so I hope that I don't lose power. If you watched the video that I posted before this, you know that I am experimenting with a new ring light. So hopefully this looks okay. I have no idea what it's all going to look like by the time I'm finished editing the video. I realize a lot of people are not interested in this category of fragrances, but being true to myself, it is a category that I do enjoy from time to time when I am in the mood. And there was a point in my life where I wore a lot of these kinds of fragrances. These are earthy, grounding fragrances. You know, it's interesting with earthy. When we think about earthy fragrances, we tend to typically think about a note like patchouli. There's actually like an earth tincture note that is used in perfumery as well to mimic what the earth smells like, what wet dirt smells like outdoors. So I happen to enjoy the smell of wet dirt. I know it sounds weird that you may want to smell like that yourself, but some people are into these really grounding kinds of fragrances. So I thought that you would enjoy this. There are a couple of like wet garden, earthy smells that I want to talk about first, because I think those are probably more palatable for most of you. And then I'll get into more daring territory as we go for those of you that are really bold and enjoy getting deeper into this kind of category. So thank you if you are watching. You're a real one. And if you don't like this category and you're watching anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. The first fragrance is one that I actually went through a full bottle of. Well, actually, it was a little bottle. I had a little bottle and I used it all up. I haven't repurchased yet. At some point, I will. This is from the Demeter, some people pronounce it Demeter, fragrance library, and it's called Wet Garden. And it smells exactly as it sounds. For me, this is like walking into a greenhouse that is hot. I mean, the temperature in there is probably in the upper 80s, low 90s. It's very moist in the air. It's kept humid in there. There are lots of beautiful, vibrant plants. You can smell both the plant life and the wetness of earth that, as you know, plants have maybe been watered recently. And it's just a delightful, grounding smell. You know, I haven't talked about the note of petrichor in a long time, which is what the air smells like right before like a thunderstorm and sometimes right after. Sometimes petrichor is associated with this scent category too. I don't think they are the same, but sometimes a fragrance may have both. And so this Wet Garden fragrance maybe has like a touch of that aquatic, ozonic combination of like a watery, airy petrichor type of smell. But more than anything, it is that green and wet earth smell that is just really delightful. If it's not a fragrance that you want to wear on your body, but you like that kind of smell, you may toy around with buying something like one of these, which these tend to be really inexpensive fragrances from this line. I mean, you can get the smaller bottles for like $15 sometimes on gray market sites, and they may go up to, I don't know, something in the $40 range or whatever for the very big bottles, but you can spray it in your shower as your water heats up and enjoy that smell as you're stepping into your shower if you want to smell like you're bathing in a fresh, wet garden. It's awesome. This is a great, great smell. This next one is really, really hard for people to get a hold of, the original version that came out in the 70s. And I do happen to have an original bottle. There is a newly launched version of this that I think is maybe a little bit more watered down. It's from Estee Lauder and it's called Private Collection, which was for me one of those really grounding scents as a youth. I remember wearing this as, I think it was like an early teen into the late teen years. Here and there. It wasn't something that I owned a full bottle of. I think my mom had this or an aunt had it or whatever. I remember smelling this and smelling it on other people and thinking that it was just such a beautiful smell, especially growing up in New York in the concrete jungle where you didn't have very many smells like this unless you went by like a city garden or went to Central Park or one of the other parks in the area. I actually grew up by a park called Crotona Park, if you're familiar with that park in the Bronx. And while it had some shady areas, as most city parks do, I do have fond memories of the greenness of that park as one of the only sort of green spaces where I grew up. And across the street from me, you know, this is a city thing. If you happen to grow up in the city in the 80s, when buildings were abandoned, they either stayed as abandoned buildings and had like vermin and all sorts of illegal activity happening in them, or they were torn down. And in many cases, when they were torn down, there was a neighborhood community garden that was put in the space, and people used like old tires to create little garden beds for vegetables and things like that to grow in the neighborhood. I had one across the street from me, so I was lucky to walk by that often as a youth as well. Anyway, this fragrance, Private Collection, is this really luscious green smell, and it's not a sharp greenness with edges. It's a very soft, delicate greenness with these powdery touches. The notes in here, there are so many notes that I won't even bother to read them to you except to say you definitely get this sort of heady garden smell. And I say heady on purpose because it can be a little bit overwhelming to people if they are not ready for this. But there's something so elegant about this fragrance, so beautiful with this nice wet earth kind of smell, garden and wet earth together. Very similar to Wet Garden from Demeter, except that one is maybe more, has like, I call it brown tones in terms of like the earthiness, the wet dirtness of that fragrance is more prominent. Whereas this one definitely has some very elegant floral touches. There are so many notes in this fragrance that it's really hard to describe. The lights are flickering, so I may lose power here. Forgive me. This next one is available at Sephora. I will link everything below that I can find. I'm probably not going to be able to find you an original of Private Collection, but do try the new one. I think it's Private Collection Low, but it is a little bit more watered down than this from what I understand. I haven't tried this, but that's that one, but that is what I hear about it. This next fragrance is available, I think, on Sephora, or at least that's where I got it. If it's still there, I will link it for you. And it's from a hair company. The hair company is called Ceremonia. I believe they are out of South America, maybe Brazil. And the fragrance is called Perfume or Perfume de la Tierra. De la Tierra means of the earth. Tierra means earth. The fragrance here, if you overspray, is a little bit cloying. So I want to share that with you. Spray lightly with this fragrance. It has these beautiful, earthy, aromatic, and powdery tones to it that can be really unique and interesting and different from the norm. You know, we're living in a fragrance world where gourmands dominate at the moment, vanillas dominate at the moment, and I do enjoy those, but sometimes your nose needs a break from the sweetness of those fragrances and the cloying nature that they can have sometimes and the predictability of them for something unique and different like this. And this is one that even my husband enjoyed on me. I will say, as this wears deeper into the dry down, I'm talking about hours and hours in, it does get a little bit of like a cigarette ashy tone to it. So this would be one I would wear if I only needed like a 4 to 6 hour wear, because after that, it does get into that territory and I want to wash it off. But the opening of this into the first general like 4 hours or so is really lovely, earthy scent. Notes in here include basil. I love basil in a fragrance. I love the aromatic touch that a basil note adds. Peach and ginger. I do pick up some gingery spiciness here, like that fresh thing that ginger lends to a fragrance. And there are some woody, earthy tones in the base as well. This is unique. This is different. You're going to smell like a fairy of the earth type when you put this fragrance on. Like I said, for those 4-ish, 6-ish hours at the beginning, and then it starts to get into like a little bit of an ashy territory. So just keep that in mind. Again, don't spray a whole lot of this like I did and choke yourself out. It is a strong fragrance, but really worth trying if this is your scent category. I just absolutely adore this next bottle. People used to call me this in my youth when I parted my hair down the middle, and it is called Wednesday, and this is from House of Sillage. At the time that I'm filming this, this is available on the House of Sillage website. I think it's for $165. In fact, I think I'm thinking of picking up one of these for like my end of year giveaway, because this is such a cool bottle. One of the cutest bottles. I mean, we're not here to talk about bottles, but look at this almost like mother of pearl inlay here and this other bluish turquoisey ocean looking thing with the little Wednesday, the hand. The hand is not called Wednesday, but across the thing. Beautiful. And you can't see it here, but the base of this, there you go, is an ombre effect where it's like a lighter purple and then a darker blue at the top. But the fragrance itself is here. Maybe this should have gone ahead of Ceremonia in terms of the wearability, because I'm trying to go up to the strongest and most pungent one at the end. This is, to me, a very wearable, earthy fragrance. One of the dominant notes is patchouli. For me, it is a soft, light, airy patchouli, this very soft rose in the fragrance, and some spiciness. Our daughter loves this, and she's a teenager, you know, and they tend to sort of be repulsed by strong or stinky fragrances. And she thought this was really cool and very wearable. And it does smell a little bit like the air that wafts out of one of those like earthy shops at the mall. We have one called, I think, is it Earthbound? And so you get a little bit of that sort of patchouli flavor, not too deep into like, people call it a hippie patchouli, not too deep into that direction at all. I find this very wearable. For me, if nothing else, this comes across a little bit woody even, with touches of patchouli and that nice spicy rose on top of that. If that sounds appealing to you and you're into bottles, friends, This is like the cutest thing and so fun to look at on your shelf. Da-dum, da-dum, da-da-dum, da-dum, da-dum, da-da-dum, da-dum, 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 da-dum. Okay, let's go next to a fragrance that I have worn for a long time. I am on, is it the second or third bottle? I'm just going to say the second to not exaggerate at this point. And this is called Cannabis Santal, and it's from the company called Fresh. They also make skincare products, and there are some other fragrances in this line as well. I purchased Grapefruit. Hesperides grapefruit this summer and love that scent. So good if you're into a genuine sugary grapefruit smell. But we're here to talk about Cannabis Santal. On the Fresh website, the 3 notes that are featured, earthy cannabis, and I disagree with that, and I just want to come back to that because don't nobody want to smell like marijuana. I don't. Patchouli and vetiver. Now, if you look on Fragrantica, it also talks about this having a chocolatey cacao note, and I think maybe even a little bit of leather and some plum. So on the website, it calls out those 3 notes, cannabis, patchouli, and vetiver. And the reason I wanted to pause on cannabis is because I have smelled cannabis fragrances. In fact, I have one here that has a cannabis opening to it, and I don't get that in this fragrance at all. So it does smell earthy to me. I do get almost like a dark chocolate nuance in the background, which happens with patchouli. There are different types of patchouli, friends. There's patchouli that smells very much like wet dirt. There's patchouli that smells chocolatey. There's patchouli that smells woody. There's patchouli that even leans in like a woody, slightly musky direction. There are different types. This one for me is like a chocolatey patchouli. And I mean really dark chocolate. I don't get a lot of vetiver, but vetiver sometimes comes across smelling like dry grass or hay to me, like hay bales. And sometimes it has a really bright, uplifting nature to it. For me, this is a very earthy, grounding fragrance. I think it smells mysterious. I joke around about this being my villain fragrance or my superhero fragrance, depending on who you want to be that day. And I've always imagined that whoever's wearing this is a superhero or a villain chasing someone on a motorcycle in the hills with like a black leather suit. Like I think about like a Catwoman in a full black leather suit wearing something like this. It's mysterious, and I think it's very appealing, and there's something really sensual about this fragrance too. So I enjoy this a lot, and I'm so glad that this is back in stock because it was discontinued at one point. Boo, we want this to stay in stock. Next 3 fragrances I find particularly daring, and then I have sort of an honorable mention that most people wouldn't associate with this category, but I do. For some reason, my mind registers it as being in this category. But next up is a fragrance that I don't wear, but my husband has on his shelf. And so this is for the gentlemen among you or my ladies who are daring fragrance wearers. And this is called Ursa from Tiziana Terenzi, which I had purchased for myself at first and found it a little bit masculine leaning, or actually a lot masculine leaning. So I gave it to him and it smells fantastic on him. I will say, when you look at the note structure for this, you think this is going to be almost intolerable, and it's not. So it has patchouli. These are the notes that stand out to me. Patchouli, a really soft leather, a little bit of oud, and something resinous and perhaps even a little vanillic in the deep dry down of this fragrance. And so what I mean is when you hear notes like that, you expect this to be particularly strong and thick and heavy and maybe even wintry. But it doesn't read like that on my husband. It reads almost like mid-level in terms of texture and heft. It does have some presence to it. It's not light by any means, but it has this level of like earthy sophistication that I think just really works well with his skin chemistry, and he pulls off well. Is this a fragrance I could wear? Yeah, I mean, I certainly could, although I would reach for other earthy fragrances like maybe some of these other ones before I would this one. And I do think that this is a thinner patchouli here. This almost smells like wet wood. Like if wet, this is going to sound crazy, hang with me. Like if wet rotting wood had a perfume version of it and it smelled good, that's kind of what this would smell like. I realize that some of you heard that and went, ew, why would anyone want to smell like wet rotting wood? But it does have some kind of appeal to it. This nice, soft, delicate leather base and some slight oudy touches. And then there's just this, like I mentioned, this sort of sweet, resinous, vanillic touch way in the background that I think keeps this from being too heavy, too cloying in the male direction. And so that's Ursa, a really interesting fragrance. If you like notes like leather and patchouli and resins and woody notes, definitely give this a try or get a sample for the significant other in your life. Okay, these next 2 are pretty dang bold. So You know, I've gotten into the House of Beau recently, and this is one of the fragrances that I hadn't tried yet. I ended up getting a travel spray of it, and serendipitously, one of you sent me a travel spray also. So now I feel like I have a little mini version of a perfume if you put the two together, because these bottles are over $300. Madness, but so good. I've enjoyed so many from the house. This one I was scared of because the notes on it sounded pretty bold. And this one is called Oro Verde. This is what their little travel sprays look like. And of course, we'll put the bottle up on the screen as well. This is the fragrance that I was mentioning, gives you a blast of cannabis, pot, marijuana, MJ, the reefer. All of that, like right out of the gate, it's like, boom. You feel like you're walking down a college hallway and people are just going crazy smoking pot or something. Or actually, have you been to 42nd Street in New York City these days? Oh my God, you cannot walk down 42nd Street without being assaulted by a cloud of pot smoke. I don't care for that, by the way. Hate that. It kind of has ruined the experience of walking around certain parts of the city for me because it's legal. And so there are like marijuana trucks on every corner. And I mean, it's too much. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Oro Verde. It comes out with that blast. But here's the thing, that goes away pretty quickly. Some of the other notes here, bergamot, watery notes, basil, watermelon, ambergris, vetiver, palo santo, tree moss. I mean, when you think about like what in the world do all those notes smell like, here's how I would describe this. This smells like the deepest part of a jungle to me. It has greenness. It has this like wateriness as though there were a waterfall nearby, like this lightness sort of hovering at the top notes of not the top notes of the fragrance, but the top layer of the scent experience. Like I always think about fragrances as having a base on that with the fragrance sits on, some experience that sits in the middle, and then maybe there are some other notes sort of sprinkled on top. And I'm not talking about a note pyramid. I'm talking about the way that you experience the fragrance throughout its life. And this smells like a deep green, lush jungle. But the greenness here has some sweetness to it that I would not have predicted. And so you have to kind of sit still with this and sniff this to understand it. And here's what else you have to do. Because I'm gonna tell you what, if I had only sniffed this off the blotter strip, I would have thought this is way too pungent for me. Like it's too strong of a smell, too thick. I sprayed this on my husband and then I walked away from him and I could smell from across the kitchen. And the sillage from this was so glorious, mysterious, alluring, captivating, enchanting. You have to try it that way. Same thing with me. So then I sprayed it on myself and I didn't spray it up in here. Okay. I sprayed it like down on my legs. And what wafted up to me was just this really lovely, green, watery, rich smell. It's almost like it has this aromatic and amber accord combined, smashed together in the background. One of the most interesting fragrances that I have smelled ever, and definitely in 2024. This is a 2024 release, I believe. Let me check for you. Well, I'm actually not sure if it's a 2024 release. I can't find it on the website. The bottle for this is beautiful. When I tell you that this is one of the most elegant and distinctive earthy grounding smells, you have to try this. If any of that sounds appealing to you, you have to get your nose on this. It is unique and different and strong and powerful. So House of Beau so far has not missed for me. It has missed in the sense, let me correct that. It has missed in terms of longevity and projection for some, especially Rosario, I think it's called, the one that has the sort of rose water scent to it, because that's a little too light for me. The rest of them have all been lovely, even if they're light. There's just something ethereal, interesting, mysterious, something, some adjective that is like, whoa, that's different. And this one is unique and different. I haven't smelled anything else out on the market like Oro Verde, which means green gold, just so you know. Really interesting. Now, this next one, if you have no adventure in your olfactory senses or in your heart or in your mind, please don't bother with this one because it's going to shock you a little bit. This one is made by a company called Costa Brazil, and this is called Aroma. So it comes in this wooden box. Now, very quickly, I think it's designed so that you can refill, like this bottom part comes out here. Anyway, this fragrance, if Oro Verde smells like a jungle, this smells like a jungle with animals in it. So this does have some animalic, at least for me, touches to it. not in the zoo direction. Okay. It doesn't smell that extreme and dramatic, but it does smell incredibly earthy, very wet earth, very dense, thick jungle. Oro Verde smells like jungle in perfume form. This one just smells like straight up jungle. If you have trekked in the jungle, you know what I'm saying. Jungles tend to be very wet and humid, and there's constant rainfall, and there are creek beds and waterfalls, and rain every day, thunder, all of that. And the air is just thick and humid, and it smells like green vegetation, and it smells like there are perhaps animals off in the distance, a little bit of that, like crushed vegetation under your feet, smushed into the deep dark earth. And there's something like so exotic smelling about the fragrance. In fact, I think it's described as exotic in the description. Let me pull that up for you. Okay, here you go. Here's the description. Evocative of the Amazon at dawn, this sensual scent is reminiscent of natural resin that grows in the jungles of Brazil and is revered for its benefits, peace of mind, focus, and balance. A blend of white jungle flora, patchouli, sandalwood, vetiver, and amber accords. It gives off an exotic, smoky scent of fresh earth, flowers, and crushed leaves. Like your first steps into the jungle, its welcoming arms open and envelop you whole. Yeah, this is one of those scents. If I want to be calm and grounded and feel like you're part of Mother Earth, whatever you think that means. I mean, I don't usually use terms like that, but for the sake of this video, a scent like this would really do it for me. And I will tell you, surprisingly, I thought my husband was going to hate this on me. I really thought he was going to be like, that is gross. He liked it. He thought it was exotic and interesting and different. So I really, really think that this is one, if you are into earthy, green, grounding scents, wet dirt, garden smells, you've got to try this. They do have samples. I purchased this off of Blue Mercury. Let me see if they still have samples on here. I think you can order samples of this, and I do think there's an oil form of this too if you want to experiment with that. So this is the most daring of the bunch. So anybody that blind buys this, you're on your own. Don't come blaming me because the scent shocked you. I warned you. I warned you. And for those of you that have tried this and liked it, please let us know in the comments. If you tried it and hated it, let us know too. That is fine. You're not going to offend me. And I will end with an honorable mention because this scent is not associated with earthy and grounding, but for me it is. And this is from Molton Brown, and it is the orange and bergamot, the eau de parfum. I think there's a toilette version too, and this is 100 mils. I think these bottles only come in this size. This is lovely. Okay, this is citrus and woodiness and earthiness. I don't remember if there's patchouli in the fragrance. I don't pick up any patchouli per se. I pick up greenness, and I pick up just an earthy background scent and some woodiness. And I think this is delightful, particularly for those of you that are maybe wanting something different than a feminine smell. You don't quite want to go into masculine territory. Maybe you're wanting to stick in the unisex direction. This might be one to try out. You do need to enjoy citrus. There's a pretty, strong orangey tone to this fragrance that's undeniable. And then it has that sort of woody earthiness in the background that I think makes this a nice grounding fragrance, especially for spring and summertime, although it holds its own in the winter as well. So let me know your thoughts. If you're still here at the end, can you drop me some kind of vegetation in the comments? A tree, a leaf, a shrub, something, a bush. So I know that you made it to the end. And if you like earthy fragrances, can you also put a heart combined with that emoji? That would be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out and learning about this category that not many ladies talk about this category at all on YouTube. I mean, maybe there's a video here or there, but this is not a popular fragrance category. So I really do appreciate if you managed to join me today and stay here through the end. Thank you so much. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.